I agree very much that climate change is exacerbating, is making worse many of the challenges that we just heard described from the World Food Programme. What are we doing with that in Europe, except also trying to do whatever we can to ensure that we have a global approach also to tackle climate change? Well, what we have been doing in Europe is that we do not believe that the market will just solve this. We know that it helps in combating climate change when you put up targets, binding that is in Europe, not just nice intentions, binding targets. When you put a price on what you do not want, like, for instance, carbon emissions, but it could also be many other things. I'll come back to that. And when you also use the tool of regulation. Allow me to be very frank tonight. There is sort of a paradigm, as if just we are liberalistic enough, markets will solve the most difficult challenges. And I believe that we need the market to help us in our endeavors. But I also believe that in all those global challenges, more than ever, we need politics. And we need politicians who are not afraid of politics. This could be sort of self-evident, but in some areas it's not. So we need politics. That also goes for the food and agriculture and climate change nexus. What we have done in Europe, for instance, we have set up land use rules. It helps, a lot of regulation there. It helps. It helps when you tell the farmers that you can only get the import support in the EU policies there. 30% of that you can only get if you're actually getting your production right, environmentally speaking, and if you have truly sustainable and climate-friendly production. That's a novelty we have done in our new 7-year budget now in the European Union. I think that will change a lot of behavior out also in the production part. We have now a whole EU budget where 20% of the whole budget for the next 7 years will have to be spent in a way that promotes our transition to a low-carbon economy. This is not a small thing. It's a new way of thinking your budget, because it means that everything about environment and climate that is not sort of just coming as an after sentence when you've done the real politics, the agricultural politics, the transport politics, the energy policy, the research and development policies. No, from the very outset, before you get money out of the budget, you have actually to think climate and environment and sustainability into this. And that also goes, by the way, for the development part of our project, of our budget, the money that we send to developing countries in cooperation with them, for instance, on food, as we just heard about. So I think that pricing, getting the budgets right, it is absolutely key. Setting targets is absolutely key, not just for CO2. We are now working with targets for resource efficiency, trying to move into a circular economy, targets against waste, recycling, all this. You've been listening to different facts and figures for waste here this evening. I do not know if this has been mentioned. Alone in the European Union, we are estimated to waste 90 million tons of food every year. It is a staggering figure, and it is an immoral figure, you could say, in a world where we, as we heard, still 800 million people do not have the most basic needs fulfilled. But even though I say that if you get the targets right, if you get the pricing mechanisms right, and you get regulation right, then my message today is that we will still not get there. We need something more. Because even where many of these elements are in place, even when the economic case is there, I think that we see too many examples that somehow people are not acting like we would like them to do. And that is, of course, where it gets really, really challenging for politicians. I know that in developing countries, you could say it's about distribution of food, for instance. It's about logistics. There are many very practical reasons. But in the developed world, there are no excuses for not getting it right when it comes to food and food production. But one of the things we are seeing in climate, maybe in particular, is that many of the challenges we face in the modern world are complex, while the political answers often will have to be rather simple. And the media also demand quite simple answers to very complex issues. We also have the challenge as politicians, as many of the issues are extremely cross-cutting, but the way that we have organized our international institutions, our administrations, our ministries, our whatever, our science departments, is very much still in silos. And there is, of course, this biggest challenge of them all, that many of the challenges we are faced with are long-term, while politics of today are driven by short-termism. That is why I think that we have to dare put some words on also the behavioral aspect here. And that is not the most popular things normally for politicians. Now I'm talking very much also from a sort of industrialized perspective. But if you go close to tell people, sort of the individual citizen, what he or she should eat or not eat, that the diet should change, things like that, that's the worst thing a politician would like to do. We had an example in Denmark this summer where a courageous minister actually did it, and he has barely survived yet, that he started to tell people what it was better to eat instead of not. I mean, it's challenging because you go very close to the individual. Nonetheless, I believe that this behavioral thing, we need to be more serious about talking about these kind of values. Because even if we got all the pricing right, all the taxation right, even if I was not treated as an idiot, as a consumer, choosing the right stuff instead of the wrong stuff, not wasting my things and so on and so forth, even there would still be some barriers to overcome. And I think that the time has come, with all the challenges that we are faced with today, that also politicians start to talk a bit more about these behavioral aspects and even use the word moral. Because it is immoral to continue as we are doing right now. Actually, it should not be that difficult. That could also be what politics are about. And I think that we have to defeat this notion that that quantity is always better, that it's okay to waste, that it's okay not to sort of use up things, that it is okay not to share and distribute better. I think that in order to get to that, we need some citizens and some different initiatives out there who will tell their politicians, go on with your overall political framework, with your pricing and your regulation and labeling and visibility and all this, but it's okay that you also start to tell those of us who are fortunate enough to live in a world where we have, in our part of the world, in Europe, where people have enough, but where if people want more than enough, then we really start hitting some severe problems. We must sort of change the whole paradigm so that it's good enough to have enough, and it's very unfashionable and untrendy to ask for more than enough. Thank you very much.